Hello and welcome to the next episode of Agri-History Tropical Edition. In this episode, we'll cover the domestication of date palm, more commonly known as dates. In this episode, we'll cover some of the natural history of dates, its domestication, and some of the cultural history of dates. First, let's talk about the natural history of dates. As of yet, no confirmed wild populations have been described in terms of the date species. The name of the species of date is Phoenica dactyus. Uncultivated forms of the species have been found across Africa and the Middle East, where they've been used for millennia, but we do not know if they are of hybrid origin, feral plants, or truly wild forms of this date species. Charred remains of the species, however, have been found that date between the year 6000 BC and 501 BC, although this evidence only provides weak evidence of cultivation. The comparatively large amount of archaeological data found in the Oman Peninsula, which we'll cover later, seem to indicate that this species was probably domesticated in the Arabian Peninsula. As of yet, due to the lack of an ability to distinguish a wild specimen from a domesticated specimen of date, the researchers cannot pin down a specific location for its origins. There are several speculated origins of this species, one of which is called the hybrid origin of the date palm. Phoenix dactifera can freely hybridize between many different species of wild date, such as Phoenix sylvestris and Phoenix canarius, and Phoenix reticulianta. Since the common date is interfertile with all these species, it is possible that the common date was domesticated from one of these species or was made from a hybrid of one or more of these species. This hypothesis was later disproven by genetic evidence. This suggests that the date palm was actually domesticated from a wild form of Phoenix dactifera, but it's unknown if the original populations of wild dates still exists due to the frequent crossbreed between both wild and domesticated forms. There may be no pure ancestral forms left. Now on to the domestication of this plant. After the domestication of the Middle Eastern strains of date palm, there appears to be a secondary domestication event that happened in Africa. Several cultivars and strains have been studied genetically, and there is a high genetic diversity within this population. In fact, the genetic differences between the African and Middle Eastern strains of date are greater than differences between the Middle Eastern strains of date and the wild strains of date. The genetic difference between the Middle Eastern and African date strains is 22.92%. The genetic differences between the wild strain and the Middle Eastern strains is 16.45%. As such, there seems to be distinct populations of African and Middle Eastern dates, and there's some evidence of occasional gene flow between the two groups, such as what is seen in the Egyptian cultivar Siwi. Based on the current genetic evidence, there seems to be some crossbreeding between another species of phoenix called Phoenix sylvestris and the common date. This may be the origin of this African strain of date. There's also been sightings of independent wild date palms being found in that area as well. This might have contributed to the genome of the African strains of date palm as well, although these have not been verified yet. Now on to the archaeological remains of date palm, and what information can be gleaned from these remnants. Archaeological evidence found in the Oasis agrosystem in the 3rd millennium BC seems to show a transition and spread of these between the 2nd millennium BC and the Christian era. This spread occurred all across the Persian Gulf and Saharan Africa, especially in Egypt. This diffusion was not only knowledge and illustrations, but also biological materials, since thousands of cultivars of different date exist today. To figure out the origins of the date, the researchers I have referenced studied and compared the seeds of different date palms found in Egyptian sites in order to see what differences and similarities the date palms of then and the date palms of now, in terms of seed shape and density, exist. They have likewise found seeds that date back to the 5th century BC in Persia and the 1st and 2nd century AD in Roman settlements and crypts. They have also found date specimens that were being grown in the Islamic period in the 8th century. Using various statistical software, as well as various computer programs that are made to analyze seed similarities, they had found greater diversity of seed size and shape in the uncultivated forms of date than the cultivated forms of date. The uncultivated forms of date being more rectangular in shape compared to the more spherical shape of the cultivated date. And these uncultivated groups were found in the Omar Peninsula. This may indicate an origin point for the domestication of dates. The archaeological evidence suggests that dates have been in domestication in Egypt since the 14th century BC, so the actual domestication event of date palm must be prior to that period, adding further evidence to the hypothesis that 6 millennia ago, the species we know as dates were domesticated. Well, that covers everything. Have a good day.